We are here to bring a new type of news show.
New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation.
Bring news just for you. It's Monday, December 23rd here in Seoul. I'm Song Yujin, and you're watching News Generation. Today, we're joined by Cheska Dae-sung.
Happy Monday, everyone!
Happy Monday! And Ki Kim.
Happy Monday.
Happy Monday. That both are here to speak on behalf of those in their 20s and 30s. So it's Monday, time to talk about the latest topics trending among the younger generation here in Korea. And today we're continuing our discussion on the fresh and creative ways young people here in the country have been engaging in politics. And this was evident, as mentioned last week, during the protests against President Yoon Suk-yeol's surprise declaration of martial law. So we touched on this last week, but it's worth noting again how our generation was very much active and involved in these demonstrations, right?
Yes, so since the December 3rd martial law declaration, there have been several public demonstrations that have been happening. And one thing that is particularly noteworthy is that we have a lot of millennials and Gen Z that participated and actually brought a different energy to the whole protest scene. So as we will discuss today, we're talking about everything from using K-pop songs to using the light bulb that they use at the K-pop concert. As you can see, some people even used carol songs to even cheer up the mood. And they're using a variety of very, very catchy flags that they customized and are really bringing a sort of a dynamism that we haven't seen in previous public protests that used to be kind of heavy and more on the serious side.
Right, because before, mostly people used candlelights that we saw during the 2016 protests demanding the impeachment of then President Park Geun-hye. But this time, as you mentioned, these protests were more like K-pop concerts.
Yeah, so much dynamism and almost excitement.
Like a festive mood.
Exactly, yeah.
Right, so young people definitely introduced a new mood to these protests this time. Then besides this, I want to ask you, Ki, what stood out to you the most related to these young people-led demonstrations?
Like both of you said, it became sort of like a young festival, young people singing, dancing, waving the flags and all. But it was admirable because what was interesting was that they were very mature. All the protests, I would say, were peaceful in a non-violent way. There are a few cases where there are people who had different political views, of course, had some crashes and some struggles, yet most of them showed orderly fashion. They picked up the trash after the protest to clean the street. Some created manuals and maps for the participants to for their convenience. There's no discrimination about who participates. They didn't care gender, age, nationality, hometown, as long as they share their same belief. Even many foreign media covered the K-protest that they showed a true democracy.
Right, so definitely the protests that we saw this time led by our generation were very vibrant, energetic, festive, orderly, and peaceful. So while we've mostly talked about the new protest culture among young people here on NewsGen from last week, now these rallies weren't the only way young people voiced their opinions. So what were some other creative approaches, Cheska?
I mean, obviously, we cannot forget to mention social media when we talk about millennials and Gen Z. So they've definitely created a lot of very interesting viral challenges to promote on social media. And I personally Googled some of them myself, but there were some very catchy songs that they used, including like Rosé's Apart, like a K-pop song, to, as we just talked about, like a carol song, because we're only 2 days away from Christmas, surprisingly. But another thing that kind of caught my attention was they created and customized flags that has extremely catchy logos. Some were very irrelevant to the actual protest. So I'm talking about, quote, the Federation of People Who Ride Line 6, or like the conglomeration of cat owners. Or there was one where it's like a group of people who wanted to stay home but were forced to come out. So these shows the creative side, and I would say even the creativeness to see the silver lining, even in a time when it can be very destructive or for some people very bleak. And the other thing is the foreign media outlet like New York Times covered several articles related to this very interesting social protest, and there were multitude of titles like using memes, satire to sort of like revitalize the protest scene here in South Korea. So I think even the foreign media outlet is quite surprised and was curious about what's going on here.
Because we've never seen something like before here in Korea, and I think in many parts of the world. Right, and I think what's especially very interesting is that the responses from young people that you mentioned, they were very quick, they were clever, and they were witty at the same time. So I want to ask you guys, what do you think enabled them to act so swiftly?
Well, we talked about this last week when we were talking about protest. As soon as martial law was declared, the military and police were, of course, fast enough to be headed to the National Assembly building and some of the other important buildings. But citizens were faster, and they were even faster than the major broadcasters. They turned on their smartphones, start live streaming the situation in real time. YouTubers turned on their YouTube Live and showed everything that's taking place. And MZers, of course, actually wrote what they think on the screen as a message. And we can get all different sorts of information from so many different platforms nowadays, besides the conventional media such as TV or radio that you're watching right now. We witnessed many college students also declaring the state of affairs. Now, back in 80s, college students back then too participated in protests, but it was hard for them to actually voice up because they were being oppressed by the police and the new government. Police used tear gas, they beat them up even, or some even died during the protests or after being tortured. You can actually see that from movies such as 1987, with the Kang Dong starring in it. And but this time around, 2,000 college students from 31 universities around the nation gathered in front of the National Assembly building to officially launch the Council for the Declaration of the State of the Affairs on the impeachment of President Yoon Suk-yeol. What's interesting is that there were so many females also getting involved, the females from 20s and 30s. They were actually participating for this impeachment motion and to show their political views.
Right, so this time we definitely saw a wider and more diverse demographic taking part and leading the charge in these protests. Now, so far we focused on the public side, but interestingly, it wasn't just the general public who took part in these movements this time, because some celebrities from our generation also garnered a lot of attention for their unique ways of supporting these movements. And this caught many off guard here in Korea, because here in the country, public figures, especially celebrities, they tend to avoid political topics, voicing political opinions, as neutrality is often seen as a virtue, right?
Exactly. For me, myself, because I've been broadcasting for nearly 20 years, and I try not to show any of my political aspect on any circumstances, on any event. But many celebrities and stars voiced their opinions too as well. For example, the actress Go Min-si encouraged her fans and young people to participate in a protest, uploaded a picture with lots of clapping hands, saying that the citizens are true owner when the impeachment motion was passed at the National Assembly. And actor Lee Jun-hyuk, Kim Jae-woo, singer Tony Yan from H.O.T., and Lee Sung-han, of course, is known to show his political view all the time, even performed at the protest, and all used their social media account to share their thoughts. And some share their old school's declaration of the state of affairs, and on their account, IU, NewJeans, and Yuri from the 소녀시대, they pre-purchased a coffee or food around this gathering area for the participants and fans. But others who have different political views also share their thoughts on their social media accounts. So nowadays, the stars and celebrities are saying and showing their political views.
Right, so this is definitely something that we didn't see in the past. This is something that we're seeing, a new addition to the protest culture that we saw this time. But on the other hand, with celebrities' involvement, there were also some unexpected backlash too.
Yeah, and I think this is something that is very worth talking related to today's topic, because most of the time, public figures do like to maintain neutrality.
Right.
But in this particular case, and I think it's great that we live in a generation where there are so many avenues, including social media and whatnot, to voice our opinions, but I don't think we should mistake that to think we can just aggressively attack one another.
Right.
And I think some of that happened to some celebrities and public figure, like people were aggressively messaging people and asking them to voice.
Right, why aren't you voicing on your opinion?
Exactly. And unfortunately, one of the very famous national trot singer, Im Young-woo, he supposedly responded to one of the messages in a very terse response that kind of almost enrages some of the fans in terms of not using his voice or his popularity to make a voice in a current situation. But I think it is also very important to know that when it comes down to politics, which is an extremely sensitive and divisive issue.
Especially for public figures.
Exactly. We should never ever force someone to say something or believe in something that they might not be willing to do so. So I think that is one of the backlashes that we've been seeing.
Right, because not really voicing your opinion is one's freedom and right as well.
Absolutely, and that's the whole point of democracy, right? We can't force someone to believe in something that they choose not to. So I think in terms of the fact that we're talking about millennials and Gen Z participating in demonstration as one of the positives of democratic society, but I think another positive is that we let people choose what they want to believe,
definitely. And talking about participating in politics, political participation today goes far beyond just joining a political party or voting, because as our panelists mentioned, from K-pop concert style protests to social media challenges and even prepaying for demonstrators' needs, our generation has found unconventional ways to make their voices heard. So I want to ask, as part of the younger generation, what's your take on this fresh new ways of political involvement?
I think it's so great, as we just mentioned, that we live in a time where we are actually able to so actively and even, I would say, be encouraging enough to participate in ways that can make something as serious or heavy as political demonstration that Kion, as you mentioned in the past, was sometimes very brutal and violent and very sad, into something that is more dynamic, festive, accessible and inclusive. I think that's a great positive. But I think one thing that we should be careful about is that we don't sway too much to one side, that we forget that what we are trying to do or what we're trying to represent in an issue like this. Because I think it is so great that people are, gathering together for an issue that we find important. But I don't want the crowd to be just swept by the festivity, that we think it's a fanfare rather than something being responsible citizens. So I do hope that people become a little bit more knowledgeable in what they represent.
Right. For example, why we are doing these protests, what this movement is like striving for.
Right, what we're trying to achieve. The end goal is more important
than the means.
Exactly, yes.
Then what do you think, Ki?
Well, I think what's going on right now is not exactly a favorable situation for the Republic of Korea as a whole, as a nation, because, having a protest and having an impeachment motion within the country would not be so much a favorable and diplomatic relationship. And we have so many other problems, other issues that we have to deal with: the finance, economy, real estate problem, the price, and all the things. There's so many different things, geopolitical issues, war going on in Ukraine and some other places. But it's important that we are actually going through this process. It's what democracy is all about. Like Cheska said, younger generation now appreciate how our fathers and mothers fought for this country to win that democracy and that power. And hopefully this could also smoothen the generational conflict that we face right now between the different generations, because we're so apart. After this long time, I'm sure there will be a brighter future.
Right. Although this process may be tough, this is indeed a way that our generation is learning democracy and democratic values.
Sure.
Right. And to listen to more opinions, we also asked our viewers what they thought about the political expressions shown by young Koreans recently, and here's what 3 of them had to say. Our first comment for this Monday, Chip Bauer 361, it's always the young who stand up to what they think is wrong. Korean protests have been extremely effective with no violence. The King's Kid FOR, those young people are participating in politics today so that they can shape their future and not just be victims of those in authority. DS191284 says they are standing up for true democracy. It's an admirable act. So after the break, we'll be joined by a young person who took part in these demonstrations this time to share his experience. Stay tuned.
NewsGen wants to hear from you. Go to YouTube and search our channel Arirang News. Click Community and leave a comment down below. Make a new type of news with us.
Welcome back. Today we're joined by Kang Kyung-dong, a Korean millennial. Welcome, Kyung-dong, to the show. Good morning.
Morning.
Morning. Thank you for joining us. So, Kyungdong, I want to ask you, how did you choose to express your thoughts on the recent martial law declaration here in South Korea and its aftermath?
I'm not generalizing, but young men in their 20s and 30s around me don't usually express political opinions. I'm actually in the same way, especially with close friends, whether male or female. I rarely talk about politics. This is even more true on social media. However, this situation was kind of different. As soon as I saw the news about martial law being declared, I immediately informed people through Kakao group chats as well as private chats. I discussed the meaning and the implications of the martial law and publicly expressed my opinion that it was wrong. Sharing such opinions was very different from how I behaved in the past. In fact, this might be the most active political participation I've ever shown in my life. Especially, I was really surprised that I shared my political opinions with people around me from the time martial law was lifted until the impeachment proceedings took place.
You know, we find it really interesting, and you mentioned it quite eloquently. Not many people in their 20s and 30s like to talk about politics or share their views. So what motivated you to join this movement, and have you ever participated in similar protests?
As I mentioned earlier, this could be considered significant political participation on my part. The reason is that the martial law holds different meanings for Koreans. Martial law and the history of democratic development in Korea have almost gone hand in hand. Honestly, I never thought something like this would happen in my lifetime. When political issues arose before, I would simply organize my thoughts internally and keep them to myself. To summarize, I strongly felt that this was totally inappropriate, and it reached a point where I could no longer remain silent. That seemed to be the biggest reason for my active participation.
Well, looking at the future, maybe a couple of years from now, for decades from now, what changes or developments you hope to see in Korean politics?
Well, when we look at the current political situation closely, both ruling and opposition parties seem to operate like one-man authoritarian regimes. Because of this, cooperation seems more distant, and political parties appear to pursue the interests of individuals with power and their supporters only. As a citizen, I reckon it's such a waste of time to participate in politics when it does not promote our personal or public interest. Above all, I hope that politicians will focus on improving the economy and welfare of citizens through proper legislation and meaningful reforms. And also hope that this chaotic political situation should be stabilized immediately. Thank you.
Definitely. All right, Kyungdong, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and your experience today, and hope you have a great start to the new week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, so ending off, our generation, we mentioned this several times on NewsGen last week, has often been criticized for political apathy, likely because we haven't experienced military rule or felt our democracy was at risk. We've only heard about these struggles from our parents, history books, or the media, but the night of December 3rd served as a wake-up call for many, as Kyungdong mentioned, reminding us that the freedoms and rights we enjoy today weren't easily won. So as we're now being recognized as an emerging political active demographic, what do you think is the most effective and meaningful way for young people to engage in politics?
I think there are two very important things when it comes to politics. One is political awareness and political acceptance. I think, as we just mentioned before, it is so great that we're living in a time where we are able to very freely voice our opinions, but that also requires us the responsibility to be aware of exactly what we're trying to say. And another thing is political acceptance. As we said, we live in a democratic society. So if we start hurting other people or attacking someone because of different views, then we're only going to create the chaos that we fought so hard to be away from. So even though there's a lot of protests and demonstration going on, I really hope that we're still able to accept different opinions and really find ways to quickly stabilize what is going on today.
Right, so being aware, responsible, and also accepting at the same time. Please share your thoughts too, Ki.
Well, like Cheska said, I really agree with her saying that we have a different opinions on political view. It's not wrong.
Exactly.
They're all working to make have a better life for everybody. And everything needs a constant care. So it should not be a one-time deal. People gathered because it was an alarming situation. When I think of the late 90s when we suffered from the economic crisis back in those days and got help from the IMF, we showed remarkable recovery. We had pan-national gold collecting movement. Some even donated their wedding rings for this country. So we can tell many of us are very patriotic, and we do think of others, and we do think of our nation. What we should do is keep showing the support so this momentum could be carried on. It was not just because a president declared a martial law this time, so we're going to protest. And just like Cheska said, okay, we did protest. Okay, what do we do this for? We have to constantly show our support for politics. And the simplest way maybe is exercising our very own right, which is voting. Participate in an election, listen to what each politician is saying, and then listen to what other politicians are saying.
Exactly.
Because they're saying this because they have some belief, they have some background information how to make people's life better. That's what our politicians, congressmen, and president exist, right? So listen to the others and try to accept them. And it's not about a dogfight. It's about making people's life better. So try to listen to them. Cast your vote.
And this is all to protect the democratic values that were hardly fought, not just from our parents' generation, but what we're fighting for right now.
Right.
And that's all from Houston today, but we'll be back tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. Korea time. Special thanks today to Cheska Dainho.
Pleasure's mine. Thank you.
Thank you. And Kiken.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you everyone for watching, and see you tomorrow. We are News Generation.